I spent the last 3 weeks building a massive enchanted forest in Minecraft. Now this base was originally a base that I had never completed, so I decided to go ahead and hop into creative mode, download World Edit, and recreate it on an absolutely massive scale. We are reimagining this thing. But without further ado, I think it's about time we jump right into it. So as you guys saw, there's actually a giant ring around the top of the base, so that's where we started. Now the circle wasn't as thick as I actually wanted it, and we'll change that a bit later on when I catch it. But for now, it's gonna stay about 5 blocks wide. Now, we have to actually get rid of literally everything in the circle. This sounds like it would be easy enough, just get rid of all the blocks, but as you can see, a lot of the water kind of remained behind, and this was just a giant pain to get rid of. After a while though, all the water's gone, and we have just a nice flat 400 block circle. Now the next step is to flatten the entire bottom, and this is when we actually start kind of laying down some blocks for the center island. Although I will say the center island here does look awful and will be edited a bit later on down the line. Now for the big island, I thought it'd be easiest to just kind of use a little bit of sand and let it kind of pile up so it looked a little natural. Then we just turn it all to stone, and this is kind of where we leave it, I guess, for now. And I also decided to fill in the bottom with lava. This is because originally the base was supposed to be modeled kind of after goblin tunnels in a way, from the Lord of the Ring and the Hobbit series, so I decided originally that lava was going to be in, but as you guys saw, it'll eventually get changed to water. That's going to be done a little later down the line. This whole center island is going to wind up changed in the end, so really none of this really mattered, and I kind of wasted a little bit of time doing it, but you know what, we were still learning, and it was a good learning experience. Now, obviously, if you're gonna make a custom enchanted forest, you're gonna need land to do it on, and I had no idea how to do that. So basically what we do here is I just kind of fill in the land with giant spheres of dirt, I guess. Now we do only do a quarter of this, and I'm kind of glad because we actually wind up coming up with a much better way of making the ground, and it looks so much better than this. So that new easier way I was talking about was literally just using cylinders that were 1 block tall and basically painting the design I wanted for every level of dirt. It did take a little while to get it all done, but it looks so much better than the sphere dirts we were using that I didn't even mind. And we're actually only going to do a quarter of this way because what we're going to wind up doing is just copy and pasting it all the way around so we can save ourselves some time when terraforming the entire outside of the base. Now the land does look a little rough around the edges right now, but that'll get fixed when we start texturing all the grass and the details and adding trees and stuff like that. Now on this first level, I actually had to fix the wood circle because it was basically replacing all the wood with dirt, and at the time, because I was still brand new to World Edit, I had no idea that there was a way to basically only affect air blocks. But I tell you, when we do figure that out, things go a lot more smoothly. Now, because I do want to copy and paste this around, I did want to go ahead and get rid of the topmost layer of dirt blocks that we placed originally, just so we didn't have to actually get rid of dirt on top of dirt. It was going to be a lot more complicated than it needed to be, so I just decided to get rid of it. Now with that top level of dirt gone, it was time to copy and paste the dirt all around, and when we did this, it didn't go super well. It went okay enough, but we did have to fix a lot of the seams to make it look good, and there was a lot of these floating patch-like areas that we just wind up filling with some dirt and some grass. Just for now, it will be cleaned up a little bit later on, but I decided not to spend a whole lot of time on it right now because I did have a lot of work to do on the outside terraforming. Now this is the part where I decided I actually wanted the ring to be twice as big as it was. So we made it 10 blocks wide, and I actually needed to go in and manually add a whole bunch of wood because what I wanted was a cobblestone wall around each of the rings. But because of the way World Edit works, there wasn't blocks kind of connecting the corners, so it wasn't actually going to wind up looking good. So I had to spend the time to go ahead and manually input every single one of those on both circles, but that didn't take too long, but it was definitely worth it because it looks really good in the end. Now here's where things got a little tricky. I needed to go ahead and start building the custom trees. I wanted to get about 5 designs in for the whole forest, and I've never built custom trees before, but honestly, using sand spheres to make it look kind of natural, and then filling in the roots and stuff last, I actually like the way that this turned out. For never having ever built trees before, I'd say this one came out pretty good, and it gave me the confidence boost I needed to make the other 4 trees and actually make them look pretty decent. With the first tree done, it was time to start work on the second tree, and I actually used the first tree's base as kind of a little bit of a starting point. Obviously, it's not going to look exactly the same, but I kind of wanted to start somewhere. Now for this tree, I actually wanted it to be quite a bit shorter than the other 2, so we went with a design that actually has 2 main trunks that kind of split off from each other, and then it kind of connects over the top and you can kind of see through it. It's a little short, it's a little stubby, but I actually like the way that this one came out too. Now here we see I'm editing the roots. It's a little bit of a smaller tree, so it's obviously going to have some smaller roots. Now as I pasted all of these in, I actually rotated them as well, so they weren't all facing the exact same direction, because I figured that would look pretty weird, especially since that'd probably be very noticeable coming from the middle of the build when you're looking outwards towards the forest. Now we're going to move on to custom tree number 3, and this one was going to be just kind of a regular standard tree sticking straight up. The first one was kind of leaning, the second one was short and stubby. I just wanted kind of a basic tree for this one. Now for custom tree number 4, I actually thought of jungle trees as inspiration for this one. This one's going to have 2 little leaf platforms almost, kind of like how you see in a lot of the vanilla Minecraft jungle trees. This, out of all the trees, is probably my least favorite one because it was a little bit of an awkward shape to build, but it doesn't look too bad, and I'd say I'm still proud of it. Obviously, the roots here look a little funky, they don't look like they fit, but with a little bit of editing and a little bit of widening the base of the tree, I think the roots look like they fit just fine. It was at this point that I actually started adding some glow lichen to the trees and the leaves as well, because I knew that with it being a forest it was going to be pretty dark, but in the end we just wind up putting some lighting blocks on them in basically post-production, I guess you could call it. Now for the final tree, we went with something also pretty basic. It's pretty tall. The leaves are actually like falling down at different angles, and I think it looks really nice. This is probably one of my favorite trees I built. My favorite probably being the first one. I think the first one came out really, really good. Now that the rest of the trees are done, we can go ahead and start filling in the last part of the forest. I wanted a lot of trees, but I also didn't want too many trees to where you couldn't really see any of the actual trees when looking from the center of the island. So there are some open plains-like areas that are a little sparse on the trees, but I think it looks really good that way. Now before we move on to terraining the grass and making it look pretty, there was one glaring issue. A lot of these trees, they had roots that were floating. So we basically had to edit the terrain around them to make it look like the tree fit there naturally. In order to do this, we literally just used the same way we built the ground originally, using 1 wide cylinders of dirt to kind of fill in the land around it. Now obviously there was a lot of trees, so this wound up taking quite a long time, but it was definitely something we needed to do, or it just wasn't going to look good in the end. Now it was up here at the custom trees that I started testing out some ground designs. Now originally I wanted to go with something a little more path-like with a lot of brown, but then I decided it kind of didn't work very well. It didn't look very good. And in the end, I actually decided to completely get rid of brown altogether. I believe what we ended up using was a mix of mostly grass blocks and moss blocks, with adding a little bit of green wool in there as well. Some of these textures definitely did not work out. The cobblestone looked absolutely awful. It would probably look fine if I had an actual path, like an actual pathway built into the forest, but considering we were just trying to find something for the forest floor, I think the exclusively green pattern, I think came out and looked really, really nice. Now for the next hardest part. The problem with World Edit is some of the commands can be really tricky to use, and the one that was the most tricky, and the one that I literally couldn't even figure out, was actual grass. So what we wound up doing is, before painting the ground with the design we chose, I actually went through and hand bone mealed the entire thing. But I'm actually kind of glad we did it, because I really actually enjoy the look of the flowers alongside all of the grass. Now I know what you're thinking with bone meal, it looks like an absolute ton of grass, and it really is, but when we start painting the ground underneath it, a lot of the grass and the flowers are just going to disappear anyway when they get blocks underneath them that can't have grass on them, such as the wool blocks. So definitely doing the pattern of grass last had its advantages. And then we went ahead enchanted the grass pattern on the rest of the build as well. And with that, there was only one thing left to do to complete the actual forest part of the build, and that was adding some bushes. Now with the bushes, I actually liked that we added a lot of greenery to the floor of the forest. I wanted to make sure that there was enough to make a difference visually, but I also didn't want it to look too cluttered, so it was really kind of hard to kind of find a medium middle ground between those two, but I think we've pretty much found it in the end, and I think it actually looks really good throughout the whole forest. Now that the entire forest was done on the outside, it was actually time to make some alterations to that absolutely awful mountain we made in the middle of the build earlier. Now we did decide to use the sand trick again. It was at this point I realized that the build was twice as big as it was originally intended to be. But once we get this all looking good and turned into stone, we decided to take a break from it and actually move on to get the entrance done because I realized we didn't have one of those yet. And the entrance was actually going to mark the center of the build, where we would basically have our first of many rope bridges that would lead to the center of the island so you can actually get to the base. Now I didn't want to do anything too overly complicated for the entrance, so we just went with kind of an overgrown archway kind of thing, and I actually think it looks pretty good. I didn't really want it to take away from what the center point of the build was going to be, which wound up being a massive tree. Now when I was originally building this, I wasn't actually sure what was going to be on the center island yet. I was actually toying between two ideas, a massive tree and a giant statue. Now obviously we ended up building a tree in the middle, and it works better with how the build came out in the end because obviously the lava does not stay there, but it was just a little bit of a thought. We were toying with it. Now here's where we actually start building the massive tree. Now just like all of the other custom trees, we used sand to get the height and the natural looking kind of sides of it and roundness. Now obviously this tree was the center point of the build. It needed to look extravagant, so it needed to be significantly bigger than all the other custom trees we built. So I wound up deciding to leave the roots for last, and we basically went off of the trunk and made all of the branches. Now they look a little chunky right now, but I do edit them to make them a bit thinner as they get towards the top of the branches, outreaching towards where all the leaves are going to be. Now before we add in the leaves, I just wanted to get all the wood out of the way, so we actually skip those for now and actually move down to the roots. For the roots, we actually decided to use sand for this, which I think actually ended up working out pretty well because sand is a gravity block. And obviously the roots were going to be kind of falling down the side of the mountain and kind of going into it in a way. And the sand actually worked out perfect for that. Now they didn't look absolutely perfect. They did need a little bit of editing because they looked a little wonky at first, but with a little bit of editing, I think they turned out really nice. It does need a little bit more detailing with some lights and stuff, but we'll get to that later. Now I actually decided to change the tree from spruce wood to oak wood and decided to use the same leaf pattern as the entire rest of the forest because I wanted to make sure that this tree looked like it belonged in this forest and it was just the basically center, like the heart of the forest. Now this took way more leaves than I originally anticipated, and as you can see, it actually starts getting very dark underneath. So we do wind up needing to light that up, but we're gonna go ahead and finish the leaves first. Luckily the leaves were pretty easy to work with. We just basically piled them on and piled them on and piled them on some more and just kept going until it didn't look absolutely horrendous. Now that the leaves were done, it was time to fix the dark underside. Now to fix this, I actually added a bunch of glow lichen to the outside of the tree on the trunk and the roots. Now obviously this is an enchanted forest, so we want the tree to look very lively and very magical, so we also wind up lighting up all of the leaves. Now we do this again with more glow lichen, but we want to add a little bit of life to the build, so we're going to go ahead and add in some glowberries and vines and let those hang down and look very natural and just adding a whole lot of light and life to the build. Now that the tree in the center was done, I needed the walls to look not the way they did, because that does not look like cave walls at all. Now, I couldn't really figure out how to do this, but in the end I decided to kind of try and ruin them with spheres of leaves because we could place them on each other so it wouldn't be perfect like it would be when you're placing air, and then the leaves would just decay if you put the tick speed up high enough. Now, this looks better, but it still looks terrible, so I actually decided I was just going to build the entire wall by hand. There was a lot of trial and error in this wall, and I will say it was a big mistake to not do the wall first. And the reason for that is, we'll find out in just a little while here, but it was an absolute nightmare. Let's just put it that way. Now here is where I started to build the walls myself. Basically, I built an eighth of it. Now obviously, it looks like it's going to wind up being pretty perfect because it follows a very symmetrical path, but because it's an eighth, when I rotate it on 45-degree angles, blocks don't like 45-degree angles, so it actually wound up looking okay in the end, even though there was a lot of fixing that needed to be done, and this actually created a lot more of a mess than I even knew about yet. Now this wouldn't have been as bad, but the problem is when I copy and pasted to rotate it around, if you don't know, World Edit uses cubes for that. So in order to get the entire wall in a cube, I wound up clipping a bunch of trees. And that just made a little bit of a mess. And by a little bit of a mess, it made a big enough mess that I really just did not want to deal with that at all. So basically we saved that for the cleanup at the end of the build. Now the wall itself actually took like 5 hours to build like this, but in the end it looks way better than what I did with the leaves, so a win, a victory, I guess, if you will. Now obviously before we copy and paste the whole thing, I actually needed to texture it because I figure why not just texture the 1/8 and then copy and paste that. No point in copy and pasting it all the way around and then texturing the entire thing, which would have been awful. In the end, I went with a mix of gray concrete, gray wool, some tough deep slate and deep slate color, and I think it looks pretty good actually. And this is basically the cave wall looking pattern that we're going to be using throughout the entire rest of the build. Now this is where we go ahead and copy and paste it in a circle, creating that mess I told you guys about. Now, it went okay enough. Now when I did copy and paste these in, it created these little seams. Some blocks or some spaces didn't copy properly, which was a mess. I basically filled them in with more spheres of stone, kind of tried to make it look as natural as possible. It was a bit tough, but it actually kind of worked out in my favor, because one thing I was really worried about with the walls and kind of just rotating and copy and pasting was it looking too symmetrical, and all of these mess ups and the seams that needed to be filled naturally with other stuff actually kind of broke up the walls in such a way that I think it actually looked much better than it would have if I just kind of copy and pasted it regularly. Now, it was at this point that I found the first of many issues with rotating and copy pasting the wall. Yeah, it destroyed the ring again, so it needed to be rebuilt a third time, unfortunately, which also meant that I needed to go and replace all of the blocks underneath the corner parts of the wall, because I had to do that in the first place, and now I had to go back and redo it again, and that did not make me very happy. But we did it. It looks good. I'll just take that as a win until I find even more mess that the wall shenanigans made. And it's at this point that I just decided, no, I'm not doing these right now. I'm gonna do them at the end of the build when I clean up everything else, and that's just how it's gonna be. You know, just out of sight, out of mind, except not really. They're chilling back there rent-free, for sure. Now, with the ring patched up and all those messes ignored, I actually decided it was time to start on the first rope bridge, the main one that was going to lead from the entrance to the tree. And it was at this point I realized the entire tree in the middle of the build and the whole mountain were off center. I mean, they were on center, but obviously the tree, you know, isn't naturally going to be perfectly centered. So I decided I was going to copy and paste everything, but properly this time, and then just kind of shift everything about 4 or 5 blocks to the left. But with the tree moved, I was able to actually make both platforms on either side and start the rope bridge. I've never built a rope bridge in Minecraft before, so it took me quite a while to get a design I liked, but in the end we got there. We actually found quite a nice design that we liked. But once we found a shape we liked, it was actually pretty straightforward from then on. Just like any other bridge, you literally just fill it in, and with this one we decided to fill it in with campfires. I also, at this point, decided I kind of wanted some ropes underneath, so I used some fences for that, And we actually extend them a little bit later on towards the end of it, but I think those look really good. I think it looks really, really good, in fact. Now that we've pasted in all of the campfires, it's actually time to do some texturing. Now for the texturing of this bridge, I decided to kind of keep it simple, but I also kind of wanted to keep the colors, so I decided to use slabs and spruce trapdoors, alongside all of the campfires, of course. But with the ropes and vines done, that is actually the first rope bridge done, and we would actually use this design for all of the other rope bridges in the build. Now that the bridge was done, it felt only natural to move to the inside of the tree where we'd be able to get down to all of the other rope bridges. This is also where we were going to have our nether portal. Now on the inside of the tree, it's actually going to be completely overgrown. I wanted the whole thing to be overgrown, to be honest. I really like that style. And in here we also used a lot of glow berries and glow lichen to kind of light up the build for you. And we also decided to change the floor back to the stripped log pattern. I think it looks pretty nice. It's nothing too crazy, but really all the purpose of this room is literally just another portal room and a way to get down to basically the entire rest of the base. Now the bottom room is basically, it's nothing. It's overgrown and leads to a pathway that leads outside. It's nothing crazy. And this is it. This is where we made the decision. This is where we get rid of all the lava. At this point I decided this tree looks really good, honestly. And it gave me more of an Enchanted Forest Oasis vibe than it did a kind of lava cave base vibe. So we got rid of all the lava and we decided to replace it with water, but before we do that, we have to build more land again. Now the sand honestly came out pretty good. I didn't want it to be flat, so obviously we had to add a little bit of a beach-like vibe to the inside and the outside. We decided to put in water first, and then I'm like, okay, no, that's not gonna work. I have to change the sand first because of the way World Edit works. It would try and place the blocks on top of the water instead of in the water. So we got rid of all that, built all of the sand before putting in the water, and then in comes the water, and honestly, I think it looks pretty nice. And this is where we actually add some birch stripped log to the shoreline to make it look like the sand on the shore is actually wet sand. I think it actually looks really nice, but let me know what you guys think. And now we're going to move on to the actual pathway that'll have the bridges on it coming out of the bottom of the tree. Now really I just wanted to get the general path that it would take to get down here, so it's not textured, it's very floating right now as you guys can see, but at least we know where the 5 platforms are going to be, where the 5 bridges are going to come off, we know where everything is going to be, and we'll just go ahead and texture it in a little bit. But before I texture it, I actually want to go ahead and get rid of the floating problem. Now to get rid of the floating problem, we actually did 2 different ways, kind of off and on throughout the whole thing. A lot of it is actually just kind of resting on more mountain that we decided to put in, but other parts I decided to actually not add in a crazy amount of mountain. I thought it would look a little unnatural, so we actually have it being held up by fences. Now it was time to move on to texturing and lighting. Now for the texturing, we literally just stayed on brand with all of the others. I wanted the style to be the same throughout all of the bridges and the pathways, so we went with more extinguished campfires and spruce trapdoors. It was a little harder to work with because it's a staircase obviously, so you don't want too many areas where you could just see straight through the bridge. But in the end we made it work, and of course obviously we needed to add some lights, so we just added some lanterns to the railings as well, just like the bridges obviously. Now speaking of bridges, I think it's about time we go ahead and copy and paste those in. Now these will each lead to 1 cave each. There will be a total of 5 caves with some base like things you would normally find, like storage systems, XP farms, super smelters, a mine, and a food farm as well. Some of these I actually had a little bit of trouble pasting in, especially the angled ones. 2 of them were easy enough because they were straight, and there wasn't too many blocks missing, but the 3 that were angled wound up needing a lot of fixing. The one thing we didn't actually fix on any of the bridges were the ropes on the bottom. Now, literally all of the fences were a little wonky on the diagonal bridges, but I think that actually works really well with the diagonal ones to make it look like there's just ropes hanging off the bottom. Now, while I was working on the bridges, I actually noticed that the tree blended in way too much to the pathway. So it was at this point I actually decided to change the entire center tree to be jungle wood instead of oak wood. And I'm actually glad I realized this, because now that I've changed it, it looks so much better and doesn't blend and just look like a big blob of wood at this point. Now before we move on to the caves, there's one more thing we have to fix, and that is all of the water. We still have to decorate it. Now what you're seeing here is all of the raw footage, because I ran into some problems with entities. But you guys get to see a little bit of how we did it. Oh, and I also added this cute little fishing dock. Look how cute it is. And with the water done, we're safe to move on to the caves. The first cave is going to be our XP farm. In the end, we actually decide to spawn in 3 spawners. One's a skeleton spawner, one is going to be a zombie spawner, and then one is going to be the super magical enchanted forest only creeper spawner, just so we can get a good amount of actual useful items here. After a little decorating to make it look like, you know, a cave. Little while later, the first cave was actually done. Now the second cave was pretty easy. This is our super smelter, and it was a relatively easy build. I'm not stopping to look at any sort of tutorial or anything. I promise that's not what I'm doing. Don't worry, I know how to build super smelters. And again, we made it cave-like, just like all the others, and I decided to actually hide all of the like redstone and the tracks because I didn't want those to be visible. I just wanted it to be, you can see the furnaces and that's about it. Now the third cave is actually going to be the central kind of storage system area. Now there are a lot of chests in here, but as you can see, I did not label any of them. There's no redstone, and the reason I didn't label any of them is because, again, I'm gonna have the world download available, so I want people to label them how they want to label them. I want it to be however the player actually wants their storage to be. But it looks pretty good, and I think we're ready to move on to the next cave, which is actually my favorite of all of the caves. And that cave is going to wind up being the food growing cave. Now this one was a little interesting because it was going to be a lot more open, but also I didn't want it to seem like we dug the cave out ourselves. I wanted it to look like we were growing food where the cave allowed us to grow food. Now this cave is probably the hardest cave. It's cave number 5. This is the mine cave, or the entrance to a mine cave, I should say. And it was the hardest to build because it actually wasn't. Now, just like the storage system and everything else, I wanted you guys to be able to actually make a mine the way you want to make a mine. So basically I just built an entrance for you guys, and you guys can just have at it. Let me know how that goes down in the comments section down below, because I'd be genuinely curious to see what you guys can do. And with that cave done, that's literally the whole build done. Literally just now, it's cleanup work. Now after actually fixing the parts of the forest that I messed up with the wall, I actually decided to turn off the lights and then add lights. There was a lot of trees that did not have a glow lichen on them, so they were pretty dark, and then I wanted the actual forest to look enchanting, so I lit it up with the exact same glow lichen-like level of lighting along the entire floor. So it looks very magical. I think it looks really, really nice. And now, of course, speaking of trees, we still have the floating trees that were the originals from the forest that we still need to get rid of. That was pretty easy. We literally just replaced them with a cylinder of air, and that was that. They disappeared pretty quickly. Now, last on the cleanup list is just filling in all of the mess we made with the terraforming. We filled in the stone behind all the caves, or as much of it as we could. And then of course there is filling up all the dirt as well, which was actually a bit of an issue because we couldn't get rid of the grass. So there's a lot of just air blocks with grass, so I do apologize. There was literally nothing I could do about that, or nothing that I could find. And with that, the base is officially done. 100% complete. Now, if you guys remember, my base originally took inspiration from the goblin tunnels from the tunnel scene in The Hobbit. We didn't stick with that. We actually decided to turn it into an enchanted forest in the end, and I think it looks really, really good. Now, originally, this was actually a base I was going to make in an SMP I used to be in called Boxscape. We never got past the actual, like, clearing the inside of the base thing. So we never got to actually fully realize it. That's what this series is all about, though, recreating our old bases, but in a mega and massive way. Now, like I said, I will have the world download available. I will be posting that in my Discord, which is linked down below. When it is ready, it should only be a few days after the video comes out that is ready to go. And when you do download it, I have a challenge for you. There is a hidden bedroom that I did not film, hidden in the base somewhere. It's not crazy hidden. There is some giveaways as to where it is, but your hint is that it is somewhere on the center island with the tree or the mountain, something like that. It's not going to be in any of the caves, it's not going to be in any of the forest, it'll be in the center area. So when you do download it and you do find that room, let me know down in the comments below what you find there, because I'm going to be genuinely curious to see who all does find out what it is. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you guys for watching. This took quite a while to complete, and there are definitely going to be more build videos to come. This was a lot of fun. Let me know what you guys think of the build down in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. It helps me out an absolute ton. And with that, I'll catch all of you guys in the next video. Peace.